You ever take a psychology class?
Yes.
Well, good. You were properly prepared for this episode. For all you other people out there, you know, maybe this show will provide you with all the psychology you need. Not really. Like, this is not going to help you pass a psychology class.
No, but it's fun anyway.
It is. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to this week's episode of the seasonal anime Checkup OVA. It's episode number 81.
Whew.
So many episodes.
So many episodes.
I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Al herself and Ladium.
Hello.
And this is a podcast where we have conversations about anime, video games, manga, those sorts of things. And we are here this week to tell you about an anime that was adapted from a video game. Who would have thunk it?
Wow.
Not like there was
two of our bases.
Yeah, not like there was like 3 other ones happening as well during the spring season.
Yeah, but at least this one was good.
That's true. We are here to talk to you about a show that we were, I would say, fairly surprised by.
Yeah.
Given its pedigree in a sense. We're going to talk to you about Caligula, aka the Caligula Effect. If you played the English release of the Vita version of the game, or if you just know the anime, it's just Caligula, because that was the original Japanese title. So yeah, I think the way we start this off is we played the Caligula Effect back last year when it came out.
Yeah, we did.
And the big thing going for that game was that it was being written by the same writer of Persona 1 and Persona 2, Tadashi Satomi, who, if you've played those 3 games, and also some of the other works he's done, like he did the Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga games, and then a couple of other things outside of when he left Atlas. But if you've played his games, you kind of have an idea of what to expect from that style of game. Like, there's going to be a lot of psychology involved, flawed characters throughout, and, you know, given his pedigree with those original Persona games, and just how different they are from 3 through 5 and everything like that, like, him kind of going back to this style of, like, a high school setting with a bunch of characters, and it's seeming like it's going to be rooted in a lot of psychology, like, that made things very interesting and, like, very intriguing about this game.
Yeah, and we pretty much bought it like day one.
Yeah.
And then we played it.
I guess, like, the one thing to say is, like, the story, I don't really have anything bad to say about, like, what we played through the story of it.
Oh, no, the story that we played through was fine.
I mean, we didn't get, like, super far into it, but, like, the one detriment to the game was the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was a nightmare.
It's a JRPG, obviously, but
Correct.
The battle mechanics are just strange. Like, it's kind of like a strategy RPG in a sense, where, like, you're pre-planning your moves and you can, like, watch them, like, transpire, just, like, see if this is gonna, like, work well, if this can combo well, and all that sort of stuff. Which I'm sure for some people that's fine. That's a style of mechanics that they would be into. But for us, it didn't connect with us. Like, I fell off it pretty quickly. I know you fell off it quicker than I did. But just the mechanics just felt monotonous with all, like, the battles you had to go through, especially because it was JRPG. And it just made the game a lot, like, more boring than it really should have.
And the social system was crap.
It was way too ambitious, I think, for what they were trying to do. Which
was
essentially, you can kind of have, like, a friendship with, like, literally every single character in the game, whether they are a side character or a very, very minor character.
Yeah.
And, like, they'll each have, like, individual quests assigned to them, which is a lot, to say the least.
It's a lot. And, like, some of them will join your party, and it's just like, I don't want to deal with all this.
Yeah. It's a very, like I said, it's a very ambitious idea. I just don't think it worked all that well, at least in my opinion. It made the thing they did in Tokyo Xanadu was a lot better. Where it was like you have a set number of like characters that you'll meet in your school, and you get to learn more about them. Sometimes they'll give you stuff, they'll help you out, but it's not like you were hanging out with literally everybody.
Everybody, yeah, I agree with that. It was well done in Xanadu because like you knew who these people were, and you could talk to them, and they would give you advice and sometimes quests, but like it was not literally every single person, and not literally every single one of them wants to give you a quest or anything. It was too much, and I was tired of like trying to befriend everybody because like being social is exhausting.
Yeah, no joke. So yeah, like that system was just very overwhelming, and it didn't help as well that like a lot of the characters that you meet are just kind of generic.
Oh yeah, it's not even kind of generic. They're very generic.
Yeah, so that was a big problem, and then just the battle mechanics being a thing. Yeah, we bounced pretty quickly. I think we got like a few chapters in, like at least a couple of bosses in, and then we were just like, we're good.
Yeah, pass. Like the story is probably fantastic, but I can't get through the gameplay to get to it.
That's what made the announcement late last year, I think around November or something, late in the year, where they're like, hey, we are going to make an anime of this game.
It was appealing.
Yeah, it was surprising because, I mean, obviously it didn't get a lot of traction here, I think just because it's a niche thing that was released on the Vita in 2017.
And it didn't have a physical release either, did it? Because I remember we both bought it digitally.
Because I think there was a thing about it where like Limited Run Games was going to do a physical release of it, but then like they got blocked from doing it.
Huh.
Let me see if I can find that.
But we both bought it digitally.
Yeah. Initially, Atlas, this is from the Wikipedia page. Initially, Atlas did not rule out a physical release of the Caligula effect through Limited Run Games, but eventually decided against it. So it was a digital only thing.
That's so
it also didn't get like really good reviews. Like the Metacritic is at 58, which I mean Metacritic's Metacritic. Famitsu gave it a little bit of a better score. Like he gave it a 30 out of 40. But yeah, it didn't really make a big impact here. Which granted, like it's not surprising because, like I said, it's a digital only Vita title in 2017, and if you ask a lot of Persona fans, like they're probably not going to know who Tadashi Satomi is.
Correct.
Or probably have not played Persona 1 and 2.
And see, I've played 1, and I played Digital Devil Saga.
Mm-hmm.
So
at least you kind of have like some knowledge of like what his style can be. Which granted,
I knew what I was getting into.
Which granted, DDS is even just like him adapting another person's story.
Correct.
So yeah. I guess it was a little bit of a surprising announcement that they were going to make an anime of this, but I don't know necessarily like how well it did in Japan. Let me see if I can find that.
Find some numbers.
It was the second best-selling game in Japan during its opening week with 31,243 copies sold.
Wow.
So yeah, and it recently did get a re-release on the PS4 where they changed engines. They made it with Unreal Engine 4, made the graphics a lot better. There's a dual protagonist now, and like a bunch of like new characters you get for the Go Home Club and new musician villains, and then like there's a new storyline as well that you can get into. I would highly doubt that comes over here.
Yeah, I doubt it.
And also, it doesn't seem like they changed the gameplay a lot from like the little bits of video I saw of that. So like, it's not something like I'm like, oh man, I'm really chomping at the bit to give Caligula Effect another try. So, I mean, it's cool that like they tried to like make it better and put it on a console that has like more reach than the Vita does. But at the same time, like if you're not gonna fix like the one problem I have with it, it's not gonna make me like jump out of my seat and go buy a copy of it.
Yeah, no, pass. Like that was the whole. I would have stayed in if the gameplay was okay. It wasn't the fact that like the graphics were Vita graphics or anything. It was the fact that the gameplay itself was bad.
Right. But yeah, that leads us to the anime adaptation.
Which again, we were hyped about because
yeah,
get the story, but skip the gameplay.
So like, weirdly enough, this was my introduction to getting a job at Crunchyroll because I pitched them an article about this series, and they're like, "Hey, you should write this." And I was like, "Okay." Which the main basis about that article was like, here's the things that Tadashi Satomi has wrote before, and this is why you should be excited for this show. But also, the weird thing is, like, he's not really associated with the anime adaptation.
Yeah.
Like, they are adapting his story, but, like, there's real no, like, credit to him being, like, working alongside them. Like, it was, like, another person writing the script for the story of the anime adaptation and all that, so it still kind of counts, but also it's a little different, especially because of the way they do this series. And that was the point of another article I wrote about how this series does something that a lot of game adaptations don't do, and that's basically flip the script on what the game story was.
Yeah, it's not a 1-for-1.
Yeah. And it's something that I wish a lot of other game adaptations like could do, which I understand that, there's so much business deals that happen with like these adaptations, probably, to where if you're an anime production company, you don't want to piss off the game studio you're adapting the story from.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're probably not going to see a lot of the style of adaptation where it's not a 1-to-1 adaptation. And also just the idea of like, fans specifically are going to want to see the story they know in a different medium.
Right.
Like, a lot of people will get upset if, you start changing things on a whim just because you can, even if it's for the best or whatever. But I think with this specifically, like, it would have been real hard to do a 1-to-1 adaptation of. And I think that's one of the main reasons why they don't go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because immediately, like in the very beginning of the game, you get like 3 to 4 party members, like right away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that here, that takes away a lot of the drama and the buildup for like, characters getting their powers and having this tension between the bad guys. Whereas with the anime, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, like it takes like a good 6 to 7 episodes for everyone to get their powers.
Mm-hmm. Including the protagonist.
Which like for a good majority of the series, like you're like, are they even going to give him powers this time?
Yeah, because he was one of the last ones.
Mm-hmm.
If not the last one.
And I think just the way they were able to take like the bare bones of the story from the original game and make their own thing with it, I think they did a fantastic job. Like they should be very much commended for what they did in terms of just like the work they are doing with game adaptations. Because like I said, like not a whole lot of people do this type of thing, and it would be real interesting just to see like the ways that companies could take game stories and make their own spin on them, do their own thing with them. Like imagine Persona 5 with like a better production company and someone coming up and like, man, this story kind of blows. What if we did something better with it?
And even then I was thinking, not that the story was bad for the Phoenix Wright games, but it didn't translate well for the anime because they were just like, okay, we had to put everything in.
Mm-hmm.
And like, imagine if they had done something unique and interesting with that anime that was in like the Phoenix Wright world. Like that would have been so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that some with like the Layton series. Because there are some Layton movies and anime that have nothing to do with, I mean, not nothing to do. They fit into the canon, but they're not any of the game adaptations.
They're their own original thing.
Right. And they were really, really good.
And I think Persona 4 Golden kind of does that.
It does.
In a way, like, well, Persona 4 Golden is this weird thing all on its own, which we'll talk about at some point, I know. But
I'm so excited about talking about Persona 4 Golden eventually.
The way that the thing is so weird is that they're taking an adaptation of a game that is basically adding on new content to another game, and they are taking that added on content and making their own anime adaptation of it, which they've already made an anime adaptation of the original game, which if you are very confused at the moment, it's understandable because there are just layers and layers and layers and layers on top of all this stuff. And they also expect you to have knowledge of Persona 4, because if you go into this without any context, I wrote an article about this, so I kind of know what I was talking about because I did a little bit of writing about this. But Yeah, they basically just they throw you in without any like knowledge, like know-how of like we're gonna introduce these characters to you. No, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah, and it's literally a new game plus. So
Yeah,
like that's even something kind of cheeky in and of itself that they're like, you know what, new game plus was a thing. We're gonna throw that in here.
but they also do some like original things with that show and take those story ideas and put their own little twist on them because they kind of have to if they're going to make this thing about added story from a game that already has its own original story and make like at least some sort of like narrative flow to it. Like you kind of have to like put your own spin on it because without that it would just be nonsense. But yeah, I really commend this show for doing like that, just making an adaptation and not making it just the same old one-to-one adaptation that everyone else does.
It was unique and it was interesting. And the way that they handled it, especially considering the fact that they only had 12 episodes, like they did a great job.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dive in, shall we?
Let's do the thing.
Let's do the thing. So I guess like the premise of Caligula is you're following the main protagonist who they name
Ritsu.
Shikishima in this. In the main game, you can name him whatever you want. So you get to follow Ritsu, and for the first episode they kind of fill you in at the end of like what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it's like, oh, we're just, we're going to school. Everything seems hunky-dory. Ritsu's a weirdo who likes to talk about psychology and philosophy a lot.
He's got his friends.
He's got his friends. They just finished up their semester of school, and now we're going to go and do the opening ceremony. And wait, why is the seniors coming back as freshmen? That's weird. That's real strange. I wonder why they would do that. And eventually you come to find out that like everyone is living in this world, which is a virtual world called is it Mobius? Mobius, yes. And for the most part, everyone doesn't understand that they're in a virtual world.
Correct.
Unless like you start to like awaken to something, air quotes, and then you start to see like everyone as like these like digital beings essentially.
Yeah, they're like, I'm trying to think of the correct word for it.
There is the phrase is like digiheads or something like that.
The digiheads, yeah, are the enemies though, aren't they?
Yes, but like a lot once you start like coming to like your powers and stuff, like you'll see like a lot of people like just like that, or like they'll phase in and out of that.
They'll have like a weird like mosaic over their faces and stuff.
That too, yeah. So yeah, basically that first episode is like Ritsu kind of like going along and then figuring this out. All the while you also learn that like Mobius is like created by this virtual idol named Mew.
Mm-hmm.
Who is like if Hatsune Miku became sentient and created a virtual world. And basically like she's become like very, very popular in the real world and in this world as well, to where like if people really gravitate towards her songs, that's how they kind of like get sucked into the Mobius world.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty much, I believe this first episode ends with you seeing Shogo, because he's already gone through the catharsis effect.
Yeah, he's already had his awakening and he's been fighting the digiheads and all that. So Shogo's there.
And Ritsu is able to see him and see like what he's actually doing.
Yeah, because a lot of people are just like, I wonder what's happening over there. That's interesting. Or like they don't see anything at all.
Or just think he's a weirdo.
Yeah, mainly that. But Ritsu's like, that guy's fighting things. He has guns. Interesting.
Or maybe that's the second episode. Either way, first few episodes, that's what happens.
Yes. Also worth mentioning, because it becomes important, and I say important, it's not really that important, but it's a funny reference.
The cops come.
Yeah, they're like, oh my God, you just said it was important. It's really not that important. Um, Ritsu is talking to his friend Marie
Hmm.
on the train, and he's reading his little psychology book, and he starts talking about the Johari windows, which is like the psychology little boxes that you're able to figure out like your relationship with yourself. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Johari box comes in at the very last episode again. So I was really happy that that was a callback to that first episode where he's like, "Hey, I'm reading this book about this thing. Let's talk about it for a second." Because they become important. Anyway.
Also, these episodes have like really long-winded titles.
Oh yeah, they're stupidly long.
Like the first episode is entitled "When You Lose Your Composure, You Cannot Reach the Truth or Reality." Let me see.
It's like an indie band making their song titles.
True. Like the 8th episode is probably the longest, where it is, "Your life shouldn't be built from someone else's blueprint. No matter how unskilled you may be, you should draw it yourself." Which I believe that's also so like the end credits, they have like a little like kind of teaser for the next episode where like they'll have Ritsu say the title of it and like in context of something's happening. And they're all little four coma comics drawn by B-Cub, the artist behind Pop Team Epic, which is a fantastic crossover.
Oh, it's hilarious.
But for like the preview for episode 8 where he has to say this, Shogo is like mimicking the fans, and they're like, "Hey, you should be more like 5. Be a little more like 5." And it's like obviously a reference to Persona 5. And it's fantastic.
It's so funny.
Because Ritsu's like, "Nah, we don't need to be." I'm like, bravo.
Very, very good. I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah.
The bleeping was hilarious.
Yeah. It's real good.
And also considering the fact that like we both hated the Persona 5 anime and really liked Caligula.
Yeah. There's like that point in time where we're supposed to like, Persona 5 anime, woof, woof, woof. And then they just do this and we're like, all right, yep.
Yep.
I'm on board
Bravo.
with this.
Perfect.
So back to the anime.
Yep.
That we weren't talking about already.
We're still talking about the anime.
It's
just
true.
The final scenes of like the episodes.
So eventually Ritsu meets his like tiny virtual idol named Arya.
She's so cute.
Who has a connection to Mew.
She does.
And she comes along to try and help out Ritsu and also Shogo as well, because he's kind of been tagged along, or at least trying to get Ritsu to help him out.
He's like, you can see this stuff. You need to do the catharsis effect. You need to help me.
And along the way, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like Ritsu's just like, eh.
What if I talk about psychology?
What if I did that? He's so funny.
And then along the way as well, you learn about the musicians who are like the enemy group in this series, and they are all people who make music, obviously, because they're musicians and they have a deep connection to Mew.
Right.
Because pretty much they are writing music for her.
Right, because she's the idol lady. Obviously, Vocaloids cannot write their own music, so somebody has to do it for them.
I play Tokyo Mirage Sessions. That's absolutely true.
It's true. I played that game too. There was Tiki as my waifu.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was terrible. At least it was a girl.
Yeah, that was the only good thing about that.
Yep.
Anyways, throughout like these first couple of episodes, you get a pretty kind of basic introduction to a lot of like the side or supporting cast of the series, and there's a lot of
world building.
There's a lot of world building, and then there's a lot of characters that you have to maneuver around.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much after the first 2 episodes, we kind of get our first like introduction to one of the musicians, as we end up at Sweet Pea's Tea Party. Which I believe it's Mifue and the blog girl, which I forget her name.
I don't know any of their names.
That's not a surprise.
I know Ritsu and I know Shogo, and that's it. And
let's go to the Caligula wiki and hope they have pictures next to names. There's a lot of characters. Like, to be fair, like, it's not easy to keep everyone in check.
There are, and like we get a little bit of explanation, and I think it's the end of the second episode where like they find out that they really can't leave the area.
Mm-hmm.
And the girl that we're referring to, like she wants to find her mother.
Yes.
And
so it's Mifue and Nanako. Nanako is the blog girl.
Okay.
But yeah, like Mifue is trying to find her mom, and she thinks she's heard that like, oh, if you go to this tea party, like you'll find out the information you need, essentially.
Correct.
And she goes there, and basically it kind of just turns the tables on her, where you start to learn to like, oh, she has this weird anger issue in terms of like people who are overweight.
Overweight, yeah. She has very intense hatred towards overweight people.
So we learn that, and also that Sweet Pea is a dude.
Sweet Pea is a dude, which I guess is kind of our first introduction to the fact that like not everybody in Mobius looks the way that they do in real life.
Yes, and that'll become a very big proponent as we move through the series, because pretty much everyone is like high school aged in this world, and not necessarily everyone is of high school age in reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, like they have that big encounter, and then everything kind of goes to back, and that.
Oh, it's kind of creepy, like with all the cutesy stuff, and then like the girls who just keep eating and everything. Like it kind of freaked me out a little, but it was a great episode.
Yeah. But that also leads to those two, Mifue and Narako, starting to also see like, hey, the world is not what it seems.
Mm-hmm. And they kind of like paddle up for a minute.
Yeah. In the next episode, Ritsu basically finally teams up with Artie and Shogo. So like they're able to help, and then also like the other two, like I said, they start to learn things that have gone awry.
Was that with a question mark?
No, it's just me saying awry.
Okay. I was like, no, then you don't really need a question mark.
I'm trying to I want to click on this episode because I can't. The full synopsis does not give me what I need. We're totally doing this on the fly. I gotta hit the pause button before it starts yelling at me. One of the other dudes, Kotaru, he's the dude with shades, and he's got a brash mouth. The next episode is where he's trying to find a friend, or his friend, who basically went to the library.
Da-ba-bum.
And then a lot of bad things happen there. The library, I can't remember if this is goes into episode 5 as well.
The what, Shonen doll?
No, I think this is just episode 4, because episode 5 is when we get the swan boat.
Oh yes.
So Kotaru basically has been going around with Suzuna, and like they've been trying to like stay together because they've also figured out like, oh, things are not as they seem. And she goes off into the library and gets lost. And then he goes and finds, I think, Protag and Shogo. And they go to the library, basically. And they meet, they figure out, like, oh, well, things are not as they seem in this library. And then they meet another of the musicians who is named Shonen Doll.
Yep.
And this is basically one of the weird things where, like, this is like a boss fight in the actual game.
Yep.
Similar to how the Sweet Pea thing was as well. But there's no fighting. There was no fighting in the last episode. There's no fighting here. Basically, you beat this boss fight with empathy.
With words.
Yeah. Which is one of the weird things, because you'd figure like, oh, well, these are prominent villains. Like, you're going to have some big showdowns. But obviously, as well, Shogo's the only one who has awakened to his powers at the moment. Mm-hmm. So they're not really going to have a big fight or anything.
But also, like, comparing it to, like, Persona 5, where you had that weird fight in, like, one of the first, it was either the second or the third episode in the castle, where it was just, like, nothing in this fight makes any sense, and it wasn't interesting to look at. Like,
oh, you mean when they, like, hit it once and then, oh, battle's over?
Yeah, I mean, like, you get interesting battles in Caligula. Wow. Later in the series, but at this point, like it wouldn't really be interesting because, like you said, one, they don't really have their powers yet, and two, like it's early game, so
Right. And also just like the way they build up to everyone getting their powers, and then like the latter half of the series is where like, oh, we're gonna have a lot of fights, and like it makes sense, and all those fights like they pay off well.
and it fits the whole like psychology thing that we're fighting it with empathy because we're trying to figure out like why we're here, why everybody hates the real world so much, that kind of thing, and figure out like why the musicians are so dedicated to Mobius. And so like the idea of fighting with empathy works really well.
Right. And like it makes sense as well that you could like take care of like a couple of these like earlier quote unquote bosses with that style, but then like later on, like when you're going further and further up the food chain, like you're gonna have to fight.
Right.
So that leads us to episode 5, aka.
Also, I just want to say real quick that like Shonen Doll was one of my favorite characters of this entire series.
Mhm.
Like just a really, really interesting villain, and the way that it was handled was spectacular. Although there was an animation error in this episode where they forgot to take out the doll lines on one person's face after everything had been healed.
Whoops.
Anyway, continue.
So we get to episode 5, which is the famous swan boat scene. Well, he's famous for
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Where Ritsu is just talking psychology with two girls on a swan boat. Like that's how we
Yeah.
make small talk.
Oh my God. So like the entire purpose of this episode is that basically like there's a dating day at the theme park, and so like everybody's trying to couple up, and uh Ritsu is talking to Flower Girl, and I don't remember her name, but he's basically like, you can see Arya, and I know that you can see her, so like let's chat for a bit. And she basically like shuts him down, saying it was like a middle school pickup line. And so in order to make himself feel better, he's like, you know what? F it. I'm just gonna go on dates. And so he takes two girls on a swan boat and starts talking about psychology with them. And it was like the funniest thing in the world. And like knowing what I know now, it's not as funny. It's kind of tragic, but at the same time, like the idea that this boy would just be like, "This is how I get women." So, psychology, two women at once.
Oh, it was so good.
It
So
was
so
so
good.
funny because it cuts to him and he's just like, "I'm in the swan boat," and like I forgot what he was even talking about. It was something about like shoot, I'm blanking on it. There's a very specific topic that he's talking about,
Right.
and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was extremely funny. Um, because I mean, this is also the episode where they talk about like the psychology of kinks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh boy. It's yeah, that thing was just entirely goofy just cuz like you see him pedaling. I looked up my article and there's a picture of it, and he's talking about defense mechanisms and self-serving
There we
biases.
go. Yep, there we go.
All the while piloting this swan pedal boat.
With two girls.
Two girls were like, "Oh yeah, psychology. Yes."
Defense mechanisms. Yeah, yeah, I know about that.
It's real good.
It's so funny.
But basically, yeah, like they go to this marine park because he gets like an invitation from Marie, and they're like, okay, let's go. It's him, and then like a couple of the others, and then they run into Kotono, who is the one who's like shuts him down because she can see Arya, and then that basically leads to like this weird fight in like a arena between Kotono and one of the musicians. And it
And
basically
it
turns into like a popularity contest.
it does. And so like the whole thing that I find really interesting about this episode, because we kind of get like a turning point here in the sense that Ritsu's kind of like at a point where he has to decide between, okay, do I just accept this world as it is, or do I fight back against it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not at all the episode where he gets his powers, but
No.
like this is kind of a mental turning point for Ritsu. Because otherwise it's just like even like with the pedal boat scene, like that was kind of him accepting the world, saying like, okay, well I can talk to women here, so like this isn't that bad.
But also the thing is that like everyone else has been able to remember what they were like in reality, and he
And he
hasn't.
hasn't. Yeah. There's also a part that we were both talking about that there's the bone zone rooms in this episode
God.
because they kept talking about how like people were disappearing as couples and so the one I forget his name, tough guy, superhero. He's like, hey, let's follow them. Let's see where it goes. And they open the door, and it's like the digi heads are like straddling the dudes who have like VR headsets on,
Yeah.
and it's really bizarre.
Real weird.
So we saw some virtual bone zone happening there. And then we get to the popularity contest.
And then that happens. And it's real weird. But that also is when Kotono is able to awaken to her powers.
Mm-hmm.
That I think bleeds into episode 6 a little bit as well. But episode 6 is where everything kind of comes to a culmination, in a sense. To where like the musicians and everyone else have a big showdown.
Also, everybody kink shamed in episode 5 because, again, we were talking about the psychology of kinks, but there's a part where guys, like, actually, there were several guys that were, like, throwing themselves down on the ground so that the musician would step on them.
Right.
Yeah, and so, like, there was a lot of kink shaming. It was great. Anyway, continue. Episode 6.
I believe this is also the episode where Ritsu kind of goes on this weird mind trip and I think runs into Mew.
Yeah, with the colors.
Yeah.
The colors, Duke, the colors.
And it's like it's basically him still trying to remember like what he was or who he was essentially. And like I said, everything kind of comes to a head in this episode where the musicians have a fight with everyone else because Mew decides to go kind of rampant because I think Ritsu denies her.
Mm-hmm.
So she freaks out, and that makes the musicians like, all right, well, we're gonna fight whoever's causing this. And that means everyone else kind of has to fight against the musicians, which means pretty much if you haven't unlocked your powers yet, this is where you unlock your powers. So it's like...
Except for Ritsu.
Yeah, except for Ritsu. So it's like Shogo, Izuru, Kotaro, Kotono, Nadako, Mifue, and Suzuna all fighting against the musicians while Ritsu's kind of just like standing there like, I don't know what's happening. I just don't remember. And he eventually awakens to his powers, but like he still hasn't remembered who he is.
Yeah, Suzuna gets a sweet hat.
She does.
I love that
She
hat.
gets a hat.
That's her like catharsis is just a giant hat.
And like a staff.
Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, like he is able to kind of like forcefully awaken himself even without remembering anything. I think just because he's like, well, I'm gonna stop Mew no matter what. For whatever reason, I guess I'll do this, and we get this huge fight, which is cool because like we've been building up to like something happening, and then halfway through the series, like, oh, we're gonna get this huge fight.
Yeah, it's massive.
Which makes the next episode kind of strange because it's a very much all right, we've had this big thing, now it's time to cool down again. Because essentially it's a month between episode 6 and 7.
Fight.
The Go Home Club has officially kind of been created. So, like, everyone is chilling in the club room. They're having a hot pot. All the while, Kotaro keeps running in and out of the room because he's saving people as Rescue Man.
Yep, he's Rescue Man.
Which is real good.
It's so funny. And they're all like, it doesn't matter if you're saving, like, these digital people, right? And he's like, yes, it matters. It totally matters.
So like the big thing that coming out of the battle is like Mew has gone into hiding for some reason. They don't know where she is, but like she's probably with the musicians. Musicians haven't done anything in a month, so it's pretty much the calm before the storm again. And we kind of get like just a little sense of like what everyone's been up to in the last month. And the big thing that the episode ends on is that like throughout most of it, Ritsu's been gone. And then, like, you get at the very end, you get, like, a cut to, like, where he's with everyone. And they're like, okay, well, what's the plan? And then you also see Kensuke, who is a member of the musicians, in the Go Home Club room with everyone. And he's like, oh, hey, President, what are we going to do? Which is a very interesting way to introduce that he joins them by turning on the musicians, because in the game, he is the first boss you fight.
Yep.
Which he does kind of get into a fight in the first couple of episodes, but it's like nothing real particular. But when you fight him in the game and defeat him, he joins you. So it's interesting that they wait until now to have him join, which I think is actually kind of like, it makes it more impactful and like a little bit more intriguing to like, where you're like, oh, wait, what's he doing here?
Yeah, and the way that they did it with like everything building up, and then that very final bit of the episode, they're like, oh, okay, he's here now. And like, wait, what?
And there's like no explanation.
Yeah, it was great. Like, it was a really neat way to do it.
Mm-hmm. So the next episode is where we kind of get like we get backstory on Izuru.
I really liked this episode.
Because he was just kind of like there. He just kind of shows up and is like, hey, what's up? And then you don't really know much about him until this episode, where like you finally get into like, okay, what's his deal? Why is he here? And all that. But basically still everything's calm.
And it's like the other side of the hot pot episode.
Right.
Because you're finding out like he was sent out to get like ingredients at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're finding out that there are like weird popularity contests with like, who's the hottest guy? Mobius.
Yeah. So we have
Ike P.
Or I guess it'd probably be EKP.
I think he says it Ike, doesn't
Does he say Ike?
And I don't know. I could say it Ike.
Well, whatever. Blonde hair or sunglasses.
Did he ever actually say his name?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Anyway, it ends with P.
Yeah. He's one of the musicians, and he's very brash, very arrogant. He thinks he's the shit, essentially.
He is obsessed with being the most popular man and the most attractive man.
Yes. And then like he's basically held this I guess ranking for a good while, and then eventually like all the girls get wind of Izuru and are like, who is this guy? We need to talk about this man. Ooh boy, let's follow him. And the musician gets real peeved about this.
And there's also there's some information that we're getting here that while Mew is asleep, that Mobius is kind of like halted.
Yeah, like it's not like if things get damaged, it's not being fixed. Like supplies aren't coming in, so like stores are shutting down. So it is basically in like a standstill.
What's her name? Sweet Pea or whatever. Like realizes that she's gaining weight from eating all the sweets because like Mew can't help her with that.
And like all the sweets places she wants to go to are closing down.
The rich girl can't afford any of her things because her credit cards are cut off. Mm-hmm. And Ike P, whatever his name is, his rankings were really tied to Mew because that was one of the things that made him happiest, was him being the most popular, most attractive. And so like once everything's kind of, which I will say that that's one of the coolest things about Caligula, is this whole idea of like, well, what happens in this virtual world when like resources are scarce? It's so cool.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea that like you don't really see explored that often.
I loved it. It was like literally one of my favorite parts of this anime, was just this entire part where Mew is asleep and they're trying to figure out what is going to happen. But so his popularity is tied to that. And once what's his name, Izuru?
Yes.
Once he comes around and like the girls start paying attention to him, it becomes like this intense one-sided rivalry. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting part where the girls who are hanging out with Sweet Pea at the second episode, like the overweight ones that the one girl hated, one of them's like, oh, I'll never abandon you for this guy because you're the best. And he's like, oh, that's good. I'm so happy that I at least have one fan. And like a few minutes later, you see that she's abandoned him. Yep. And it hurts. Like, you feel really bad for him, even though like he's an utter like, you can feel like that pain from these guys. And that's what I think really is effective about this anime, is that you really understand that you have empathy for the villains, even if they are villainous. Mm-hmm. Like, you understand their motivations, you understand where they're coming from, and you sympathize with them because like it does suck being bullied. And he brings that up a bit because of the store clerk that gets bullied because of the clothing thing. But you kind of, I don't want to say that you relate to them so much, but like you can understand where they're coming from. And for a sense, like you can relate to that because a lot of people do have issues of like, okay, the opposite sex doesn't find me attractive. That's kind of sucky. I'm being bullied. That's also really sucky. Um, and I think, the rich girl in real life, I think her issue is something to do with finances, and I can get that. I'm unemployed right now. So, they're getting their biggest wishes in Mobius, and so they kind of rely on that for validation. And once Mew is asleep and they're not getting that validation anymore, then everything really starts falling apart, not only in the world, but for them mentally.
It's a bunch of shades of gray in that the idea that, oh, if you can have something that can make you ultimately happy, some people are going to use that for something, that's beneficial to them or for others. And then some people are going to abuse that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the way the show does it, like it does a good job of covering that entire spectrum.
And it does a whole lot of, I guess, psychology in the sense of like, what is happiness?
Mm-hmm. Which is basically the main theme of this show.
Correct.
So yeah, like you were mentioning, like a lot of there's a lot of backstory in this episode for like those two characters. For EKP, you get to like learn that he was like a store clerk, and he was treated pretty poorly. And then for Izuru, he basically was like propped up because of his looks, and that essentially broke him at a point to where like he had to take like a sharp object to his face and then like cut himself in order to make himself feel like he was actually alive.
Yep.
And then like the main reason for his anxiety in Mobius, and the reason he wants to go back to reality, is that every time he tries to re-inflict those wounds to himself, they just immediately heal because Mew basically thinks like, oh, well, he wants to have like a perfect face. He doesn't want to have those scars here. That would make him happy. And he's like, no, I want to have those scars here because if I don't have those, like, I don't feel alive. I don't feel like I'm actually like a person.
And it's a cool thing that we get here because when he first awakens, he gets like a bullet wound on his left cheek, and it heals really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And like I never really thought about that, but it would be something that like that would be a cool thing to trigger him because he realized like, okay, yes, I am alive here, that I need to get out.
Also, like when he is in his like when he has his powers activated, like his entire left side of his face is covered.
Yep.
Which is interesting. Also, one of the other things we get in this episode is Ritsu being approached by Kensuke about joining. Mm-hmm. And Ritsu's just like, you sure you're not like a traitor or just like trying to spy on us? And then he just eventually lets him join. So he's like, yeah, okay, cool. We're good.
Definitely one of the hardest scenes to watch in this entire anime, though, was Izuru, like, after the roof breaks and there's glass everywhere, and he's, like, laughing hysterically and cutting himself repeatedly.
Just
like
stabbing himself in the face with, like, a piece of glass.
It was really hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, it was disturbing, but, like, in a really good way.
That leads us to the next episode, which these last 4 episodes don't have synopsis, but I think I know what happens on these episodes. I hope so. I believe episode 9 is when the Go Home Club enacts their plan from episode 7, which is, hey, we're going to charge in on where the musicians are.
Yep.
And try and take them out.
They found out that there's like a tower where they hang out, which I mean like makes sense because they now have a former musician in their ranks.
Yes. So that's basically the whole plan. They run into a few snags, obviously. Like they run into Shadow Knife.
Snags. Oh my god.
Shadow Knife is a musician who basically thinks like he has this one form of justice and that's it. And he's going to enact it on everyone.
Yep.
And then they also pretty much get we get like an actual introduction to Thorn this episode. and how she is supposedly connected to Shogo, which makes him freak out.
Yeah, he like the way they animate his eyes when he figures these things out is terrifying. Like he's messed up when he sees her. Because she's kind of been like in the background of everything. You haven't really gotten an introduction to her. And then when you see her and he like freaks out, you're like, okay.
Also because immediately she just jumps off a roof.
Yeah, that too.
Which is bad.
Yeah. Which the whole thing with Shadow Knife is a bullying instance as well, because you find out that whoever he was in real life was like horribly bullied. So he chooses in Mobius to bully back.
Yeah, he comes back to this world and like it like basically just specifically targets the people who were bullying him.
Yeah, and he takes the form of like a popular anime character.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny, but it ends really tragically.
Because he I think he gets thrown off the roof of the building or like falls.
There's an explosion and it knocks him and I forget his name. Rescue Man.
Kotaro.
Yes. They're like basically both holding on to like the like metal pieces of the building from the explosion. And he's trying to save him and like he slips and he falls and I think it's Arya who says that like she can no longer sense him.
Yeah, basically we get the thing of like you die in the game, you die in real life.
Die in real life, yeah.
That type of thing.
Because she says like, you know, I can no longer sense him. Like, well, he'd be fine, right? And just like, oh.
About that.
Yeah. So, something I probably should have mentioned like 8 episodes ago.
Yeah.
If you die here, you die in real life. So he's probably dead.
So essentially their whole idea of like, oh, we're gonna storm in and figure all this out. We're gonna find a way to escape. It goes very badly.
Yeah, it fails miserably.
So like they have to kind of regroup after everything that went down because yeah, it was real bad. But the big like tease at the end of this episode is that you see
so like, where's the president?
Yeah, you like where's the president? And you see Ritsu basically going back there, and he finds like these doors and enters them. Which is like we read something about like the remake of this game where they've added stuff to it, and we had thought the idea like, oh, he's switching sides.
Yep.
He's gonna turn on them, which isn't the case.
It is not the case. I actually like what they did better.
Yeah, but it is. He is doing something that the others don't know about.
Correct, and so he's missing for a few episodes.
So we get like the next episode 10, which is titled Caligula.
Backstory time.
It is, yeah, it's literally a huge info dump of backstory, but also something that was needed because we haven't really got a lot of that backstory for any of these people, like barring like a few here and there, but for everyone, like it was like you kind of have a little hints here and there of like who they are, but in reality, like you don't really know like, okay, what are these people actually like? And I think like I saw a lot of people kind of like giving this episode flack because it was like a little bit of like it's kind of filler, but also I think like it's a really good job of like establishing, okay, who are these people? What are they actually like in reality? And how can this show use that to push them forward in the next 2 episodes?
Yeah, I think it was totally necessary. I don't see that it was really filler.
So essentially it is literally all of the Go Home Club like
saying who they were.
I think the only one who doesn't is Kotono, but she saves that for like the final episode. So you learn that Shogo, he basically calls himself a murderer.
He's 30.
Yeah, he's really old.
Hey! Hey!
I'm kidding.
I'm 30.
I'm kidding. But he's older than their portrayal itself. He called himself a murderer because like he'd had this friend who had like taken a liking to him. Like he really wasn't like good with people before, and eventually things get real sour to where she's like, "Hey, we should die together."
Yep. And
he basically backs out of that at the last second, and she dies, but he lives on, and he feels immense amount of guilt about that. The one thing that's really messing him up is obviously that Thorn looks exactly like the
Exactly
girl
like her.
who killed herself. And that's why he like freaked out immensely. You learn that Kotaro is like a middle schooler, and he has an obsession with heroes because like his dad was a firefighter who passed away, and he wants to like fill in those shoes, but he's not necessarily like grown into his body, and he's like a smaller middle schooler, so he has a lot of anxieties about like I want to save people and help them, but like how am I supposed to do that with the way my body is, and like I don't have like the strength to do that.
Which you find out that he's a middle schooler because when Sugar says that he's 30, he's like, "Wow, you're over half my age," and he's like, "Excuse me, what?" Um, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it's not something you'd expect that he'd be like a middle schooler because he's one of the tallest ones of the group, and he uses like a pretty heavy like hand weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's a middle schooler, a small middle schooler.
Kensuke is like just a dude who wanted to be a musician.
Yeah, so that his is kind of like the most boring of them.
And he's even like just says it like, look, my backstory's not that like super like crazy or anything. It's like I just wanted to write music, and like my parents didn't want me to do that, so
here I am.
Here I am. Naruko is someone who basically was getting trolled on the internet and tried to like switch that around on people, and it ended up like becoming like kind of like popular on the internet, but like the popularity was very like fake and void of like real interactions with people. It was just like more people who were into the ways that like she was just trolling on the internet, which is like very very 2018, I guess.
Oh yeah.
So like she basically kind of comes to the realization like all these people that follow her like don't really care about her. They just like care about like her content and like the kind of like stuff that she's doing. Mifue, you basically kind of like she tells you like what you already kind of know. Like she has a mom who like has battled being overweight, and I think she have like an eating disorder?
She has an eating disorder because she's afraid of becoming like her mom. Because she was really, really embarrassed that her mom was overweight.
And then Suzuna is just like, hey, I don't have friends. I don't really know how to talk to people. Which is also something you kind of like already had an idea of like what it was going to be after the Shonen Doll episode.
Yep.
So that is everyone's like backstory that you get. The only ones you don't get is Kotono, because she's like the last one to go, but then like things go crazy at the end. And then also Protag, who is missing at this point. So this episode ends because I believe the reason they were kind of going around and talking to everyone is like they get locked into the room.
Yep.
And at the end of the episode, Marie comes back, the friend of Ritsu, and she just chucks a grenade into their room.
Yep.
And then she's just gone crazy all of a sudden.
Yeah, because like throughout the entire show, she's been fairly normal. She's been like one of the friends of Ritsu and kind of like a background character because you assume that she's just one of the like recreations in there, but nope. She's nuts.
She is, yeah, she's kind of lost it and just starts chucking grenades and explosives and all sorts of stuff at the rest of the Go Home Club. So that's why Katana isn't able to give her backstory. And then we also see that protagonist is in the real world.
Yep.
And I believe that's how that episode ends, with those two revelations. Episode 11 is where we finally get Ritsu's backstory, which is a bit of a bait and switch because the person you see who wakes up in episode 10 is the person that Ritsu has modeled his character after.
Yep.
Ritsu in reality, it does not look like that. The person he's modeled his character after is like the team lead of the Mobius project, essentially. And actual Ritsu is kind of like this very introverted person who has trouble connecting with others and found a way to connect with Mew when they were developing Mobius, and that's kind of like how Mew got all of her ideas of like what happiness is supposed to be, is through talking with Ritsu, and then she just disappears, and he kind of like isn't able to handle it, and then has to and forces himself into Mobius to try and figure out like what happened, but loses his memories in the process. All the while, though, in the real world, people who go into Mobius basically go get like this. There's some sort of syndrome they have classified that as, but like they kind of go into comas essentially.
Yep.
And no one is waking up from them, but Ritsu has been able to. So like the team lead's like, "How are you back? Like you should not have been able to wake up. Like that's not possible." Ritsu's like, don't worry about it. I'm here to I'm fixing Mobius. That's what I gotta do." So basically, he just like goes back to like his company's building and like just furiously trying to code, gives other visual Ritsu, I forget what his name actually is, but
shoot, I knew this one. It was like Shingo or something.
That sounds about right. But like he gives him like kind of like a big rundown of like, okay, what's happened, why I need to fix this, and then he's like, well, why don't I help you? And Ritsu's like, no, I can do this. I gotta do this myself. So yeah, and then all the while that's happening, like there's just a fight happening in the school in like actual Mobius.
It's intense because there's like lots and lots of bombs.
Mm-hmm. Lots of explosions are happening.
Yeah.
This is where the series really remind me of the Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth games, because like they have like a very similar idea where it's not necessarily like, oh, you go into like the virtual world, you just fall into a coma. It's like if something really bad happens to you in the virtual world, you fall into a coma and like you're boned. Like there's no coming back from that. Like they explored that in the recent game where like there was like a way that they could do that, but it was like very, very risky. But essentially it's a very similar concept of like, you know, virtual world leading to like something bad happening to you in like reality. But this takes it a little bit a step further where it's like, oh, if you just enter this world, you're done. Like your actual self is gonna have a long nap essentially. But actual Ritsu kind of comes to terms with like, oh, I kind of screwed this up. You know, I gotta come and fix this. And then like the end of the episode is like Arya popping up on a screen is like, hey, we gotta go back.
Back to the future.
Right, so we gotta go back. So yeah, like she's like, hey, we gotta go back to Mobius, and that's how we're gonna fix things for good, because Mew has gone berserk again.
Yeah, she's gone nuts.
And then that leads us to the finale, which obviously things are still going very poorly in the school. Like they're having a lot of fights. Thorn has showed up to fight Shogo, and then he learns there that like Thorn isn't actually the girl that died, but like another friend of them two, who was like kind of like obsessed with the girl who died and wanted to be the one that she offered to kill herself with.
Yep.
So she took the looks of that girl and went to Mobius to haunt Shogo. A lot of people just not looking like themselves.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It is a mess. Eventually, like the fight with Marie gets to a point where like her legs get blown off.
Yep. Which I've discovered reflects how she is in real life. Because apparently she's paralyzed in the actual world. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that because I didn't finish the game.
All the while, Mew is destroying Mobius.
Yep.
And then eventually Ritsu comes back and is able to kind of like save everyone. And while Mobius is being destroyed, he like teleports them out, which I assume means like they get out of Mobius.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's finally just him and Mew. And the reason that Arya has brought him back is like, hey, you have come to an understanding of what happened, of what you did, and of like what you need to tell Mew. You need to tell her your actual feelings of what happened and convey them in a way that she'll understand. So that's what he does. That's why he comes back. Mew is still kind of gone very hectic, so where it's like she just stabs him at one point, right in the gut. But like it doesn't like necessarily affect him that much because he's still able to kind of like come back and chit chat.
Yeah, I mean he struggles for a bit. He gets
Yeah,
like butt blood, which is really
butt
weird.
blood.
But if the butt blood disappears at one point, it made me really upset. But he's got like these blood stains going down his butt.
But essentially, the idea that he has to convey to her is like, hey, when I was telling you what happiness was, like I was wrong. Like that's
Yeah.
not what happiness is. Like happiness is going to differ from person to person. It's not going to be just like what I tell you because that's not going to be the same for everyone else. So hey, I messed up. Let me tell you of like what I think happiness actually is. And he's able to do that and basically kind of get her back under control into a way where like they're able to get out, or at least he's able to get out. And then the show ends essentially with like you come back to reality and see what everyone else is doing or like trying to do to improve themselves now that they've had like the experience that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Now that they've come to like the understandings of like who they actually are, like what their true selves are, which that's very much Persona 1, Persona 2 style. Like, hey, come to an understanding of who your actual self is.
Yep.
So like you get like a big like just kind of rundown of like what everyone else has been doing, which I don't remember what everyone else has been doing. But it's a big montage of that, and I believe the show ends with like Ritsu in his room putting a hand up to his monitor, and you see like a pink hand like reach out back. Who knows who that could be?
Mm.
But yeah, like that's how the show ends.
Which I mentioned the box at the beginning, but the scene where they're talking and like they're shown on the box was just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
But I like as well like just the way that the show ends is like, you know, obviously as you've gone through the entire series, you learn that like everyone that was in the Go Home Club is a flawed individual.
Right.
And them coming back to reality, despite, you know, the fact that they want to go back to reality, it doesn't make them automatically like a better person or like fix them. Like these are still people coming back into reality that are flawed individuals, which is what I told you the other day or like yesterday. Like that's a hallmark of Satomi's writing where like if you look at the cast of Persona and Persona 2 throughout both those games, like those are casts that are very much flawed individuals, and by the end of it, like despite if like it's a happy ending or not, like not all those characters are fixed, or even if like they do get like a happy ending, which it's kind of what happens in Persona 1, like those are people who have a lot of emotional scars and baggage to where like they have to carry that even into Persona 2 because a good majority of the characters that are in P1 come into P2, and like when you see those characters in P2, like they're not fixed by any means. Like they have a lot of weight on their shoulders still. Even if like they try and like hide that or like put out a new front, like there's still a lot of things that are bothering them that happen from Persona 1. Like these are not fixed individuals, and that's the same thing that happens here in Caligula. You know, everyone who comes out of Mobius is not fixed, and they still need to find like what's going to be their happiness.
And I think that that's a really interesting thing about this series is that like we were discussing this yesterday?
Yeah.
That you read that somebody said that like the happy ending kind of like went against what it was about, and I was like, it wasn't a happy ending.
Right.
Like everybody still has real big issues that they're having to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think one of the most intriguing to me was like Shogo is like stumbling and says like he forgot how to put on shoes because he hasn't left his house for so long. I was like, wow, you know, that shows the amount of damage that was done to him like by his friend's suicide and how much he blamed himself. And like he's trying to get better, but he's still like he's struggling. And
I wonder if that as well is like obviously like, you know, people not coming out of like him specifically, like, hey, I'm not coming out of my house for a while, coming in a shut in, but also like how long they've been in Mobius, like that's gonna
Your muscles are gonna deteriorate.
yeah.
Hmm. But everybody else seems to be doing okay.
But like obviously we don't know like how long it's been since like they got out of
Right,
Mobius.
right. Um, like I don't know though. Like Susan is still alone,
Mm-hmm.
and
Kotaro is
cell
still
phone.
having is still very much like having problems. Like you said, Naruko is like she's like, oh, I'm just deleting all my blogs. Like it's not necessarily she's fixed everything.
Yeah. And the shoot, I keep blanking on names. Like the middle school kid is still like idolizing
Yeah.
the heroism. Like not a whole lot actually changes
Mm-hmm.
for these people. And like yes, they're back in the real world and they've probably learned something, but like I don't really see it as a happy ending and the sense and especially like Ritsu learned a lot, but Ritsu is still doing the same that he was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
He's still a shut-in. He's still obsessed with Mew and he's professing his love to her.
The only thing like I think the ending like gives them is it gives them opportunity to change.
It
It's
does
not
give them
gonna,
opportunity.
but it's not an immediate change.
And it's not given in the sense of like we see that change happening.
Right.
Like we do see an effort in some instances, but there's no guarantee that that's going to work out.
Exactly. Like I mean, I go back to Persona 1, Persona 2 a lot because like that's the big connection between these works, but
Right.
one of the main villains from Persona 1 comes back in Persona 2 because he gets mind controlled. And the big like one of the big things like when you fight him again, like the characters from P1 are like, dude, why did you come? Why are you back on the like as a villain again? What happened? Like I thought we were able to reach out to you. Like I thought we were able to kind of break through to you with empathy. And he's just like, look, that's just the way things are sometimes. Like I just can't help it. And I think like that's a really interesting idea of like character choice of like, look, like you can have these characters think like, oh, we're going to be able to save this person, but from whatever circumstances,
Not everybody can be saved.
not everyone can be saved. Yeah. And I think like with the way this ends, there is the opportunity for like, hey, all of these people could have an opportunity for change. They can become better and all that. But at the same time, whether it's people in the musicians or in the Go Home Club, there's also the flip side of that to where nothing's going to change for them because, whether it's circumstances, opportunities, or just the way they are themselves that they can't change, like they'll either stay the same or become worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very intriguing idea, I think, just story-wise, because usually when you have endings, it's hey, we'll make it ambiguous at times, but also it's easy to kind of like understand where characters are going to go or where their arc's going to go. But with this, like it could easily go either way.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I like the idea that there is that hope there, but I also like the idea of us not knowing.
Yeah, it's very good.
I really like this show. I thought it was well done. And I mean, there are some issues. Like, I know that the last episode had some weird animation bits.
Yeah, there was some weird animation bits like kind of just like throughout the series.
Like I mentioned the one in the Shonen Doll episode, but
I don't think it was like enough to make it like terrible. It was just like it was wonky here and there. I mean, that's just kind of like when you're watching something being simulcast around the same time that's being shown on TV, that's going to happen. Like there's going to be a lot of imperfections because the animation team is just busting their to get it out there as quick as possible.
Right.
Like if you want the better version, wait for it to come out on home video. But despite some little like wonky animation here and there, like it was fine. I think I liked, or I should say I liked a lot of just the way they did character design and like the way they did like some of those like weird color sections at times.
I loved it. It was like a weird like watercolory crayon-y looking. I loved it. It looked like a picture book.
Yeah, that was a really really cool design. But yeah, just in general, like, you know, as we were talking about at the top of this episode, we're like, this was a game where we kind of bounced off pretty quickly, and we're just like, about. And you know, there was always the possibility that this adaptation could have been junk.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it could have been.
But I think
Easily.
they did an excellent job of adapting this game and making it a way to where, you know, people who have played the game or who haven't played the game can easily get something out of it
Mm-hmm.
in a way that sometimes anime adaptations of games aren't able to do.
One thing that we should definitely talk about before we like wrap this up though, especially considering the nature of it, is the music.
There was music.
Oh my God, Jared. Oh my God. You hurt me sometimes.
I mean, music is your forte.
It is, but you know, it's a Vocaloid.
Yeah.
And for one, not Vocaloid related at all. The opening is amazing.
It's real good.
Literally one of my favorite openings in ages. Like, it is so good. And it's the voice actors for Ritsu and Shogo. And oh boy, every time I listen to it, I just get hype as.
And also, like, they implement a lot of the music from the game into this, but like they've remixed it.
Yeah, like Peter Pan Syndrome got remixed, and I love the anime remix. We talked about it when it first showed up in like the first or second episode. We're like, yeah, that song, it was good like the first 10 times we heard it, and then it kept playing. But the anime remix of Peter Pan Syndrome was just chef's kiss. It was so good.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit better than hearing it 30,000 times in a row.
It does, but it had like a bigger kick to it. I felt like it felt more like an actual like battle theme than it did in the game itself, because the way it sounded in the game was kind of like
just a like a Vocaloid song.
Yeah, it was calm.
Yeah.
And then this one, they're like, nope, no more calmness, let's go. It was great.
Yeah, like,
and like every other episode you get a new song for her, something like that. Maybe not every other episode, but you get new songs pretty regularly.
Yeah, pretty frequently. And it was all good. Like, I really enjoyed just the way they were able to kind of like, I mean, obviously a lot of adaptations do this where they take music from the game and put it into the anime, but like just doing the way they did it to where like, you know, we're going to take that same music, but like, we'll like, once again, put a little spin on it, put our own little touch on it and throw it in there.
Or even like put it like as the underlying song, like while big events are happening. Like, it's really smart to do it that way, because again, it's a Vocaloid like based world, and so you have the Vocaloid singing out there, and like that's who's affecting everything, but then at the same time you have like the actual dialogue and the important events happening down below here.
Yeah, it's
really really cool.
Yeah.
And usually the songs have something to do with whatever's happening at that point, like,
right.
Of course it does. Really really good. I didn't like the closing song as much as I liked the opening song, but it was good too.
It was way more chill, obviously.
It was way more chill, which maybe I needed a chill after an episode of Caligula. But you know, you had all the action, and then you got like the comic strips at the end, and then you got the chill theme song. It was pretty good.
Yeah. Also, one of like the composers that worked on this, like there's a lot of composers, because obviously like there's a lot of different music, because
right,
the game also had this, but like one of the main composers that I think did like just original music had worked on like Naruto, Fairy Tail, also Sailor Moon Crystal, to name a few. The Fantastic Tiger Mask W. Let me get that in there again. So like even just like without like just the Vocaloid stuff, like there's a good pedigree of like of people who wrote music for this series. So
I mean, it's really fantastic. And there have been several people in my life that I've recommended this to now. I know of one of them who's currently watching it. So, Chris, if you've already finished it by the time that this comes out, please listen to this. And hello, I'm glad you watched it. I hope you liked it. which he sent me a text message like through the first episode or something. He's like, I'm getting like a Matrixy vibe from this, but with Vocaloid. I'm like, yeah. You'll get that. So I hope that that he likes it. But I keep recommending this to people, like, please watch Caligula, please watch it. It's so good. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I really, really like this anime. It's one of my favorites that I've watched in a long time.
Which I doubt is something you thought you would say come when we first started watching the show.
Right, because that nightmare of gameplay made me just hate it. And so, like, I know that this story is not, like, one for one the exact same story that we got in the game, but this adaptation of it is really wonderfully done. And it does a lot of great things that I felt like were not only fun to watch, but smart.
Yeah.
And you don't always get that from anime. I know that sounds dumb, but like you don't always get smart anime.
It's true.
And it's not smart just because it's like throwing in psychology. Like you can't just throw psychology at the wall and that makes it smart. But the way that it utilizes concepts of psychology within the narrative itself is what makes it so cool to me, is that it's just beyond a sense of like, hey, let's just throw some names of like psychology in here and that'll work, right? And it's like, no, they're actually like straight up taking those concepts and implementing them into the story and the characters themselves, and it's fantastic. It's beautiful. I'm choking on my spit because I got so excited. I've been so excited to talk about Caligula.
It's true. You've been like,
I was really ready to do this episode. You've had to deal with my text messages about it.
You've been very excited. Very, very excited.
So yeah, I really would recommend this to most anybody.
Especially if you know, obviously if you like Persona, like I think this is kind of like a given of like, hey, you should definitely check this out.
And I think it's a really interesting take on like mental health.
Yeah.
That you don't often get in, for one, Japan, and two, in Japanese media. Because every single one of these characters has some kind of issue, like some of them to very extreme amounts. Like the one girl has an extreme eating disorder to the point she's in the hospital because of a reaction against her mother. And I mean, that's intense.
Right.
And it's not really something that you see in media a lot. And especially done in like a respectful way.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I'm a nerd and I loved it, and I would probably swoon for a boy who took me on the swan boat and talked about psychology like for real. Like, knowing that Ritsu was an adult and knowing that he was taking girls on swan boat and talking psychology, I'm like, you know what? I would. That's all you need to know about me, really. Just the fact that, like, yeah, okay, I would totally make out with a dude who's swan boat psychology to me.
Can't even get that all out there.
I, you know what? That's the way to my heart, man. Now we know the secret. Step 1, be an adult.
Good step 1.
I mean, it's really hard for anime these days, you know?
That's true.
Step 2, get me on a swan boat.
Step 3, get psychology did.
Yes. Please talk to me about defense mechanisms.
Oh boy.
But anyway, that, like I said, that says a whole lot about who I am as a person.
So I think the moral of the story is watch Caligula, don't play the game.
Don't play the game, watch the anime.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look out for swan boats.
I mean, they're not going to, like, attack you.
You don't know. What if it's a swan dressed up as a boat?
Oh my god, then they might attack you. Stay away from them. They're vicious. They have, like, teeth.
Exactly. It'd be dangerous.
Wasn't there a swan boat in Tokyo, Xanadu too?
Yes.
Wow, so I'm finding connections in media that I like and swan boats.
The big correlation.
Wow. I don't know why I said it like that. That was a weird way to say wow.
Wow.
I'm blushing like a million times to red. I can feel my cheeks just being on fire. I feel like I've revealed a lot about myself today on this episode.
Yeah, you like adults, swan boats, and psychology.
Yeah, adults is key there. Please be an adult.
So soon we'll find out a big list of media with swan boats in them, and then go through all of them.
Also, 30 is not old.
Who would ever say that?
You!
You cannot prove that.
You'll be 30 someday.
Maybe.
I mean, yeah. You're not going to die before you turn 30. I won't allow it.
All right.
I will come resurrect your
You're just gonna pull me out of the grave and get up.
You can't do this until you hit 30. Then it's fine. You can do whatever you want then.
Once I hit 30, I'm gonna gray my hair and start walking with a cane. Look, I proved it. I'm old.
People still think that I'm 16 years old, man.
You gotta run with that then.
I got the baby face. But yes, we will start our ultimate mission of finding all media with swan boats.
That's what we're gonna do. All right, that's gonna wrap this episode up.
Yeah, we're done. This is all we need to do now. It's over.
If you would like more from us, go to seasonalcheckup.com or sec.cool, where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Seasonal Checkup and Jared and Now Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you want more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She has columns and reviews on her site, like a brand new one.
Yeah! I did the thing.
Where you talked...
It's not about swan boats.
It's unfortunately not about swan boats, but you talked about... your
do you want me to tell?
Your relationship with Persona 5 and the latest Fooly Cooly.
Yep, I sure did. I wrote it... It's been in process for what, half a week, something like that?
Maybe 2 weeks.
Maybe. So it's been in the process for a while, but I finally got it up. Please read it, and if you hate it, then I don't need to know. If you like it, then please tell me.
I liked it.
Yay! Thank you. Yeah, you were the first person I sent it to.
Yeah. What else do we have? Oh yeah, Twitter. If you want to follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/animecheckup is where we do the Twitters.
You can see me talk about Akihiko Sonata at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's just every day.
That's true.
You can follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA if you'd like to support this very podcast, because that'd be cool.
Yeah, we'd like that. We'd like you.
Next week
is a week.
It is indeed a week. But I think we have an idea of what we're going to talk about.
I think so.
It's a certain thing we've been playing.
It is a certain thing we've been playing. And it'll be nice because we'll be able to talk about several different versions of it.
That is true. I'm ready to talk about some bones I got to pick with this version that we're playing. Because, oh boy, I did not remember that this game was as rough as it was when I first played it 6 years ago. Yeah,
I mean, there's some issues. It's still okay, but it's not the definitive version.
It is not the definitive edition. We talked about this last year and once again in a part of a retrospective, but it's finally time to talk at length since we are playing a version we haven't played in a good long while. We're going to talk about Persona 3.
I have not played it since, I think, 2008, based on the name that I used in the save file.
Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played since 2012, because that was when I bought Persona 3.
Well, now you spoiled what it's going to be.
I already said it.
Okay.
I said it before that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm an idiot.
Someone's just not
Anyway.
listening, clearly.
No, I'm listening. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
understand words
Mm-hmm.
apparently. Um,
Sorry, I should have said Swan Boat Persona 3.
no, that's not what. I guess I just got distracted by Akihiko
That's
Sonata.
probably also the fact.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, we'll do a dive into that game, the various versions of it, because
Hmm.
there are quite a few, and dude, they need to remake that game.
Yeah, they do. I'm about that life.
It's true. So I look forward to that next week, and we'll meet you there.